amazing. And one of the stories is from Iliad 10, when Odysseus and Diomedes go in and they kill Dolan and of course all those other men as well. Then we have a story about Troilus, who is jacked by Achilles, and then we have the Trojan women, and then we have the artwork representing Hector and Achilles. Of course, Hector, a dear friend of Aeneas's. Aeneas will give a groan heaving up from his depths. He sees the plundered armor, he sees the car, he sees the corpse of Hector there, and Priam reaching out with helpless hands. And then we're told at line 580 and 590, he sees himself. That is to say, art is like a mirror where you see reflected yourself. He sees himself, right? And then, from this artwork, he sees for the first time Dido, the amazing queen. Like Diana, triumphant, we're told, she comes to her throne at line 610, and then all of a sudden he sees his men. In other words, note the dramatic irony of this. Here is Aeneas and his pal, and they're standing in the mist, so nobody can see them, and they're looking at this artwork, and then all of a sudden they see Dido. Whoa, she is amazing. And then all of a sudden they see all of their warriors that they thought the ships had been lost, and nope, there they all are, which is, of course, going to make him very, very happy. They watch, they're unnerved, as the men come in front of Dido and supplicate. So we're back again to the Iliad and supplication. Pity us at 633 and following. We're bound for Italy. We need your help at line 655. We once had a king, Aeneas, none more just, none more devoted to duty, none more brave in arms, but we've lost him. Of course, Aeneas is watching this happen, reminding us of the ways in which Odysseus played a similar kind of game. They ask for help at 660. Help us to return. Finally, ultimately, help us get out of here. Dido will reply. She will say, cast fear to the winds, Trojans, free your mind. Our kingdom is new. She says, who hasn't heard of Aeneas' people, the city Troy, and the horrendous war at 680? She says, I'll provide you safe passage, that is to say, Xenia, as we learned it from our study of Iliad Odyssey. We will be one, she says. This city I build, it's yours. The ironies are here dark, right? She says, I will help you in any way I can. And then all of a sudden, we will have Aeneid, who will turn to Aeneas, and he will say, don't you think probably that the coast is clear now and that we can speak? The mist rises, and there Aeneas stands at 703. Clear in the light of day, his head, his shoulders. The man was like a god, the refrain that we heard, of course, in the Iliad and the Odyssey. His own mother, Venus, makes him stunning, right? So this will be the first time that Dido, soon these two will be lovers, right? We'll see. And sure enough, here I am before you, he says at line 710, the man you're looking for. He says, this is our remnant that's left of Troy, stripped away of everything. Now it's past our power to reward you gift for gift, Dido. He says, if there were gods, if there are powers, line 720, who still respect the good and the true, if justice still exists on the face of this earth, may they, in their own sense of right and wrong, bring you your just rewards. There's dark irony here, because of course Aeneas is going to jilt poor Dido in the end, and he's going to leave her to her death, right? He says, so long as rivers run to the sea, so long as shadows travel the mountain slopes and the stars range the skies, your honor, your name, your praise will live forever, whatever lands may call me to their shores. In some ways, he's saying it already. I'm not going to stay here. I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time. Of course, Dido's not going to hear any of that, right? He greets his warriors. Dido will, in fact, ask, are you that Aeneas whom loving Venus bore? The ironies, of course, will be here in a second. Venus is going to make sure that Dido falls for her man. And then finally at 748, 749, so come, young soldier, she says, welcome to our house. My destiny, harrying me with trials hard as yours, lead me as well at last to anchor in this land, schooled in suffering. Now I learn to comfort those who suffer too. She sends grit, she sends gifts down to the men at the ship, right? And then into the palace. It's an amazing palace. Reminds us of Odysseus with the Phaeacians. There's art everywhere representing heroic deeds. And then we have the final break. Aeneas, well, we're told, immediately remember his son Astyanax. A father's love would give the man no rest. Quickly sends Achates down to the ships to take the news to Astyanax. Bring him to Carthage to take care of the one son. Let's remind ourselves that we've seen in the Iliad and the Odyssey that fathers and sons and the bonds that they have are so important. Virgil will play the same game, emphasizing the value of the relationship between fathers and sons. Now, obviously, we're going to have some discussions of daughters as well, but it's going to be fathers and sons that will play such a pivotal role for Virgil in his understanding of what makes Aeneas such a powerful man. And of course, he will have his own father that he will as well take care of. So we've got that tri-generation thing that we had at the end of the Odyssey as well, won't we, right? He'll send back to the ships. He's going to get a gift at line 770, a stiff gown, Helen's glory. So we're back to Helen again. The marvelous handiwork of Helen's mother, Leda. Aeneas will add as well some other gifts, and back they will come. But at 781, we are told, Venus mulling over some new schemes, new intrigues, sounding very much, of course, like Athena in the Odyssey. Altered in face and figure, Cupid, who would go in place of the captivating Ascanius. Ascanius, the boy of Aeneas, is going to be changed. Cupid's basically going to inhabit the young boy, okay? Using his gifts, he's going to fire the queen to madness, weaving a lover's ardor through her bones. Virgil was not, he didn't miss it, that the number one metaphor of the Odyssey was weaving, and so we're going to have more weaving. Cupid is going to look like Ascanius, and in the end, this will be why Dido is so quickly going to fall in love. She speaks to Cupid and she says, I need your help. I need you to help out your brother. That is to say, Aeneas. And so we've got a reference to God fighting God, because she says, we got to take care of this situation with Job. Hear my plan. And then at line 810, she says, I'm going to put Ascanius to sleep, and then I'm going to put you to forge his appearance just one night, and you're going to put on the familiar features of the boy, and when Dido picks you up and sets you in her lap, you're going to basically fill her with passionate love, and there will be no way that she can say no. This will, of course, be exactly what in the Iliad, pre-Iliad, we know happened with poor Helen as it related to Paris, when Paris came to visit Menelaus and, of course, his wife Helen, right? They have this huge party at 840. They, we are told, admire Aeneas' gifts, especially the gown of Helen and the veil. We will remember at the end of the Iliad we had that falling of Andromache's veil, right, which is symbolic of so many things that happened or would soon happen at Troy. And above all, we're told, tragic Dido at 850, doomed to a plague about to strike, cannot feast her eyes enough, thrilled both by the boy, Ascanius, and the gifts that he brings. And the more she looks, the more the fire grows. But once he's embraced Aeneas, the son, clung to his neck, to sate the deep love of his father, deluded father, Cupid makes for the queen. Her gaze, her whole heart is riveted on him now, and at times she even warms him snugly in her breast. So the boy is sitting on her lap. I mean, you've got it. You've got love. You've got the passion of Cupid sitting now on the lap of Dido. That is to say, Dido does not have a chance at all. She will fall in love. Notice, her gaze, her whole heart is riveted on him now, and at times she even warms him snugly in her breast. For how can she know, poor Dido, what a mighty God is sinking into her, to her grief, right? She forgets the memory of her old husband, Zacchaeus, and, of course, she ultimately will begin to fall in love. We've got wine that's a part of this project with the party at the night. 870, line 870, the queen calls for a heavy golden bowl studded with jewels and brimmed with unmixed wine, the bowl that Belias and all of Belias' sons had brimmed, and the hall falls hushed as Dido lifts a prayer. Here's the prayer. Jupiter, you, they say, are the one who grants the laws. Notice we're back to laws of host and guest. It's Aeneid, right? May this day be one of joy for Tyrans here and exiles come from Troy. A day our sons will long remember. Bacchus, giver of bliss, and Juno, generous Juno, bless us now. And come, my people, celebrate with all goodwill this feast that makes us one. Of course, Dido's already determined that she's met her new husband, and this is it. Of course, with that, we have the party that's about to begin. Time and again, the Tyrants will burst into applause. The Trojans will take their lead. So we're told at line 899, so Dido, doomed, was lengthening out the night by trading tales as she drank long draughts of love asking Aeneas question on question. Now about Priam, now Hector. What about what armor Memnon, son of the morning, wore at Troy? How swift were the horses of Diomedes? How strong was Achilles? And then, wait, come, my guest, she urges. Tell us your own story, start to finish, the final lines of Book 1. That the ambush laid by the Greeks. We're going to hear this over and over again. The Greeks only got into Troy because they cheated. We're going to hear this, the Roman version of how the Greeks won the Trojan War, right? The pain your people suffered, the wanderings you have faced. For now is the 7th summer that has borne you wandering all the lands and seas on earth. Tell us your story, in other words. And we will end Book 1, prepared for Book 2, and the story that Aeneas will tell. It is one of the amazing moments in all of literature that Virgil is able to recreate the fall of Troy in the 2nd book. We'll get to it. It's amazing. Let's jump to level 2 and 3 quickly. At 2a, well, obviously, we've said this before. Heroes are clearly defined by what? Well, sorrow, struggle to survive, as well as, of course, great acts. Another major message here is this idea of falling in love. It's no choice for poor Dido. The will of the gods, that is to say, again, the gods get blamed, especially Venus in this case. I also like this message. Jot this one down. Think about the power of art. Here we have a great poem, obviously art, talking about other art. And what is all of this art? Well, 2 things. These are the stories, as we say, that we tell to define ourselves, either accepting or rejecting parts of those stories. Think about how the art is like a mirror. Certainly we'll play this game when we study Shakespeare, especially his play Hamlet. That we've already seen this, or we will see this in our study of Aristotle's Poetics, that art is kind of like a mirror where you look into it and you see yourself reflected back again. Think about the power of that. Aeneas, 7 years after the fall of Troy, is looking at art that in fact describes what's going on. We have the famous line there about Aeneas saying that he's weeping, he's powerfully moved because art has this ability to capture this memory of what transpired. At level 2b, well, obviously the symbol, we're there, so let's stick with it. The symbolism is obviously the Trojan panels, the panels of the art of the fall of Troy, the stories that in many ways define us, a powerful symbol. Think about symbolism of Cupid. Blind love. Dido has no idea what's going down, and she, of course, is going to end tragically. Juno, of course, as well, kind of symbolizes that vengeful deity. We saw Hera playing a similar game in the Iliad and, of course, in the Odyssey. The irony of all ironies is, of course, Dido has no real idea that she is holding love in her lap, right, as she plays that game. Well, at level 3a, the Iliad, well, come on, there's so many references here in Book 1, right? Think of it. We have Thetis, the mother of Achilles, going to Zeus as supplicant. We have Venus, of course, going and talking to Jupiter about her son, Aeneas. We could make those connections on in regards to the Iliad. In terms of the Odyssey, think about it. In the same way that Poseidon will try and jack Odysseus, we have the same game being played with Helios and his winds, only here we have Neptune, who is going to say, knock it off, right? Think about the role of Helen as she relates to Dido and the judgment of Paris, and the way in which that stands behind everything that has happened. Juno's hatred of the Trojans because of her rebuffed beauty is the way that Virgil will say it, right? Well, what are the texts for you that come to mind immediately? Shipwrecked, being on an island, and then all of a sudden stumbling into the woman of your dreams or the man of your dreams, and all of a sudden we're going to have this famous love story that goes down, and it's going to end tragically, so we definitely want to say that as well. Jot down for you the text that comes to mind there. Finally, at level 3b, wow, these questions become self-evident, don't they? A time you had to go through a major pain and struggle and find your way through a lot of pain. And in many ways, that pain defined who you were. Or a time that you thought tragedy had happened. Aeneas thinks all of his ships have been jacked, and then come to find out that it didn't happen. What was a time that you looked into a work of art and saw yourself reflected back again? That is an interesting question. What was the time you were like Aeneas? He goes through the fall of Troy. We're going to hear about that in Book 2. Goes through the fall of Troy, and then all of a sudden he sees it, 7 years later, sees it represented. What a mind screw that's got to be. What was a time that you looked into a work of literature and you saw yourself reflected in it? And then finally, of course, we have to ask, what was a time that you or someone you know fell head over heels in love with somebody and it ended up tragic. And everybody kind of knew it was going to end up tragic, but you or whoever you're talking and thinking about just couldn't avoid it. It was like inevitable, if you will. Finally, we could ask that question. I mean, do you believe that notion that Shakespeare will play with Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers, the idea that, love is kind of an inevitability, and there's just nothing you can do to fight it. I mean, it's just one of those things that has to happen. Well, there it is, the first book of the Aeneid. We turn now to Aeneas' story. And it is amazing poetry. I mean, I hope that you will be able to spend some time reading it before you come to my lecture on it. When we come back, we will spend our time with the fall of Troy. And of course, in the process of Aeneas telling the story, Dido is as well falling. Let's see that irony. Thank you.